Welcome back, everyone, to Behind the Arc Basketball. What an incredible March Madness tournament it has been. Crazy upsets all over the place, and now we're here to the Final Four for the 2021 NCAA Tournament. It has been awesome covering play-by-play games throughout the March Madness tournament, and I cannot wait to cover these Final Four games for you guys. So in this video, I'll be previewing the first Final Four matchup between the number 2 seed, the Houston Cougars, versus the number 1 seed, the Baylor Bears. Tip-off time is slated for 5:14 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, the Cougars became the first team in NCAA tournament history to win against all double-digit seeds to get to the Final Four. As we'll take a look at Houston's path here to the Final Four. It's Houston's 6th Final Four appearance and their first Final Four appearance since 1984 with Hakeem Olajuwon and the Phi Slamma Jamma Houston Cougar squad. In the first round, Houston beat the number 15 seed Cleveland State 87-56. In the second round, Houston knocked off number 10 seeded Rutgers 63-60. Number 2 scorer Marcus Sasser went just 1 for 9 shooting from the floor. He scored only 4 points in 26 minutes. Houston trailed by 9 points with under 5 minutes left to go, but they did go on a 14-2 run to close out the game with a W. In the Sweet 16, Houston knocked off number 11 seed Syracuse 62-46. And in the Elite 8, Houston beat the number 12 seed Oregon State 67-61. Houston led by 17 points at halftime. They did allow Oregon State to come back in the game, cut the deficit to 2 points, 1 under 3 minutes remaining, but they were able to close it out and get the W by 6. So now we'll take a look here at Baylor's path to get to the NCAA tournament as well. The Bears are in the Final Four for the first time since 1950, marking Baylor's 3rd Final Four appearance. In the first round, Baylor knocked off the number 16 seed, the Hartford Hawks, 79-55. Baylor did get out to a slow start in the first 12 minutes. They trailed 14-13 with around 8 minutes left to go in the first half. But other than that, it was Baylor ever since as they took control of that game and got the W. In the second round, Baylor knocked off the number 9 seed, the Wisconsin Badgers, 76-63. In the Sweet 16, Baylor beat the number 5 seed, Villanova Wildcats, 62-51. Baylor was trailing at halftime in that game, 30-23. They only shot the ball 3 for 19 from three-point range, which they're known for being the number 1 three-point shooting team this season. In the Elite 8, Baylor beat the number 3 seed, the Arkansas Razorbacks, 81-72. Baylor get out to a red-hot start. They led as many by 18 points midway through the first half. They did allow Arkansas to crawl back into the game as Baylor led by 4 points, the closest of what it got to, 64-60, with around 7 minutes remaining in the second half. Now we'll take a look here about strengths for these teams. I'm going to take a look at Houston's first for this one. That's where the Houston Cougars, primarily led by their defense. Their defense is what will keep them in this game. A lockdown defense, have the number 2 defense nationally for Houston, allowing opponents to average 57.6 points per game this season. Houston in the tournament allowing opponents to score an average of 55.8 points per game through 4 tournament games. Also for Houston, known for their perimeter defense, locking up the outside, as Houston ranks number 5 nationally, holding opponents to 28.3% shooting outside. Buddy Boeheim of Syracuse, he made 13 three-point shots combined in the first 2 tournament games against San Diego State and West Virginia. However, Boeheim was held just 1 for 9 from three-point range shooting in the Sweet 16 against Houston. Now we'll take a look here at some of the strengths for Baylor. The first one being their top three-point shooting team in the nation. So Baylor's perimeter shooting, it's going to be tasked here going up against the top perimeter defense of the Houston Cougars. Great matchup to look out for. The bread and butter for Baylor coming from the 3 balls. The Bears hold the nation's top three-point shooting percentage at 42% from the perimeter. The top 5 scorers for the Bears, which are all guards, Jared Butler, Macy Teague, Davion Mitchell, along with the 2 6-man players off the bench, Adam Flagler and Matthew Meyer, are all shooting the ball at 39% plus from three-point range this season. The Bears at any time can have at least one of these players or multiple players get red hot at any time during a game and go off scoring from the perimeter. Macy Teague scored 35 points against Texas Tech this season. Davion Mitchell dropped 31 against K-State. And Jared Butler scored 30 points against Kansas. Baylor's three-point shooting going to go up with another strength here of Houston. That happens to be Houston on the glass. That is a big, big key for Houston here going up against Baylor in this game. Houston's rebounding strength, even though the Cougars undersized in the front court, they are tough, they are physical, and they are a plus 45 on the glass through 4 NCAA tournament games here, as Houston is leading 158 to 113 in total rebounds over their 4 opponents combined. The Cougars as well, what's the specialty for theirs? Offensive rebounds specifically. That's where Houston is plus 35 to 4 tournament games in offensive rebounds, as they are out-rebounding their opponents in the offensive glass 62 to 27. The Cougars rank 6th nationally in rebounds per game, just under 41 rebounds per game. Houston is 3rd nationally when it comes to offensive rebounds, over 14 offensive boards per game. Now, that's where Oregon State had a ton of trouble and lost that game because they could not box out and defend Houston on the glass. Houston led the total in the offensive rebounds in that game 19-7 over Oregon State. As for Houston here, some of the key players, as I went over Baylor's backcourt just a couple moments ago, but for Houston, key players to watch out for: Quentin Grimes, guard for this team. Houston's leading scorer, averaging 18 points per game. Former transfer from Kansas, as Grimes has made at least 4 3-point shots in all 4 of his NCAA tournament games so far. Guard Marcus Sasser, he made 5 3-point shots in the last game against Oregon State. Sasser scored 20 points against the Beavers, which marked his highest scoring total in over 2 months for Houston. In the front court for Justin Gorham, he is averaging 8.7 rebounds per game, the top rebounder of this team. He had 10 rebounds against Syracuse and Oregon State. And then the point guard, he has been terrific for Houston throughout the tournament, doing basically everything out there in the court. Dejan Jarreau, he's been key throughout the tournament, controlling the basketball. He has 16 assists to just 4 turnovers during the last 2 games. So with Jarreau at the point, Houston, they're going to look to control the game. The Cougars, they're in the back, very back of college basketball when it comes to adjusted tempo per KenPom at 328th nationally. So big key in this game for Jarreau, controlling the basketball and not allowing that ball to be turned over, which Baylor, that comes down to their strength here, which is forcing turnovers, as Houston's only turned over the basketball 8 times in the last 2 games. But a major key for Baylor, forcing turnovers. They are 9th nationally in most forced turnovers per game. Baylor played the number 1 and number 2 teams nationally in the tournament with the fewest turnovers per game. That is Wisconsin and Villanova. Baylor forced Wisconsin into 14 total turnovers. The Badgers are number 1 in the nation in fewest turnovers per game. Villanova turned over the basketball 16 times, and they are ranked 2nd nationally behind Wisconsin in fewest turnovers per game. Baylor, all throughout the season, they will make you pay once you turn over the basketball. The Bears are absolutely lethal in transition on the fast break, and they will earn those points and put them on the board, which comes down to another strength here for Baylor, which is passing. Passing, a huge factor this season, finding the open man and knocking down open shots. The Bears are top 15 nationally with over 16 assists per game. Baylor has 2 players in their roster that can facilitate, move the ball around to the open man. Jared Butler coming into this game averaging 4.8 assists per game this season. Davion Mitchell averaging 5.3 assists per game this season, as Butler and Mitchell are combining to tally 38 assists to 16 turnovers throughout the 4 games in the NCAA tournament. Sharing the basketball, of course, is a huge key for Baylor this season. Now, Baylor, with their offense, they are loaded. It's going to be going up against what Houston is weaker in, is their offense. So Baylor's high-powered offense, 83 points per game, 6th best nationally, will take on a Houston offense which has struggled to knock down their shots during the tournament. During the last 3 tournament games, Houston is shooting just 65 for 181 from the floor, which is only 36% shooting throughout their last 3 tournament games. Obviously, offensive rebounds and second chance points off of putbacks has been a huge factor here towards helping out Houston win games throughout the tournament, but the Cougars going to have to make their shots on Saturday to stay in the game against a high-powered offensive attack for Baylor. The way to beat Baylor for Houston: number 1, got to lock up Baylor's perimeter attack. Houston's defense, they are capable of doing that. Number 2, for Houston, got to limit the turnovers against the scrappy Baylor backcourt. Number 3 here, you got to attack Baylor and put the Bears into foul trouble if you're Houston, which is a huge key here for Houston in this game. Houston, they did have luck to get to their side in the Final Four, needed to get past Rutgers late, and Oregon State left 9 points off the board at the free throw line for a team that ranked top 30 nationally in free throw shooting percentage. For Baylor, Baylor needs to get out to an early start, as for Baylor, one of the things that they've struggled here throughout the tournament, even though they are the top 3-point shooting team in the nation, it is getting hot through half of those games in the tournament in the perimeter. As being off multiple days of basketball, that might have had something to do, as Baylor was cold shooting from 3 against Hartford and Villanova. In those 2 games against Hartford and Villanova, Baylor combined to shoot the ball 14 for 52 from 3-point range. That is only 27%. After 1 day of rest, though, when they took on Wisconsin in the second round and Arkansas in the Elite 8, the Bears combined to shoot the basketball 16 for 32 from 3-point range at 50%. If Baylor's threes aren't dropping, then the Bears are going to have to adjust like they did against Villanova in the second half and drive down the lane inside and attack Houston. Now, Baylor, as well, they cannot afford to get players into deep foul trouble against Houston. Their loss against Oklahoma State back in the Big 12 tournament, they got multiple players in foul trouble early, and that was a reason why they lost that game, along with being cold from the perimeter as well in that one. As for the 2 key players they cannot get into foul trouble, the first one, 6'5" forward Mark Vital in the front court. He is going to have to be huge for Baylor competing against a Houston team that constantly crashes the glass. As the other player here that cannot afford to get into deep foul trouble early on for Baylor, he did in the last game against Arkansas, picked up 2 quick personal fouls in the first half. That is Davion Mitchell. Mitchell only scored 2 points in the first half against Arkansas. In the second half, he took over so fast down the lane and just controlled tempo and took over that game, as Arkansas was able to cut it to 4, and then Mitchell was able to take over, get some key buckets down the stretch. As for this game, though, another one is, how will Baylor hold up on the glass? As Mark Vital, he cannot afford to get into foul trouble. Defensive rebounds, that is the major weakness for Baylor this season. The Bears finished last in the Big 12 in defensive rebounds. They're going to have to be top-notch in rebounding to compete against Houston on the glass here in the Final Four. So as we go down this game, deciding factors lead to this to be in this game. Number 1, can Baylor's undersized front court, led by 6'5" forward Mark Vital, be able to hold their own and compete on the glass against Houston? Number 2 deciding factor here in this game, will Baylor be able to come out hot shooting, or will the defensive wings here for Houston be able to shut down Baylor's perimeter attack? And then number 3, for a deciding factor in this matchup, will Houston be able to keep up with Baylor offensively in this game here? So either way, this should be a terrific game. Battle of 2 Texas teams, stacked backcourts at the right side of the bracket in the Final Four. I think it's going to be a close one here between these 2 teams, and that's where it's going to lead me here to my prediction for this game. And I will predict in this one, Baylor I will take. As I'll have Baylor winning the Final Four, going to the national championship, as I feel like Baylor's multiple offensive weapons, they're going to be able to get it done, advance to the national championship. It's not going to be a walk in the park in this game, though. It will be close, and Houston's defense will test Baylor all throughout the game, as I predict Baylor 69-66 over Houston. That's a wrap here to this video. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to my channel. Also, let me know your score predictions to the Final Four matchup game down in the comments below as well. I'll also be covering play-by-play of both Final Four games in the national championship game, so make sure to check out my play-by-play live streams as well. I definitely and highly recommend it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, as this is Behind the Arc Basketball.